GC12, clear takeoff, left hand. Takeoff left, this is speed 1. Left land, swim west, copy. Speed 1. Crossing 21. Crossing at 24 is
Hello and welcome to the Blueskies podcast. I'm PR Ganapati, your host.
GC70, roger, report type southeast, connection, for the midway, and field selected.
It is a real delight today for me to speak to an old family friend, but also a legendary professional helicopter pilot in the Indian Air Force and in Indian civil aviation, Wing Commander B.S. Singh Deo. Wing Commander Singh Deo was commissioned in the helicopter stream in 1969. And in 1988, after 8,200 hours of flying, he was seconded to Pawan Hans, where he helped set up, particularly work on the Westland WG-30, where he was trained in the UK and was an examiner. He was an A1 instructor, which is a very rare category for people to get, won a trophy during flying instructor school, trained as a test pilot, where he won the prestigious Suranjan Jas trophy, and was one of the few officers who had a Master Green category in 4 helicopters simultaneously, the Mi-8, the Mi-17, the Chetak, and the Cheetah. After leaving the Air Force and Pawan Hans, he flew in Malaysia and then represented Bell Helicopters in India for many years. He'd also seen action during the 71 war, where he was flying Mi-4s in Jodhpur. So today we're going to have a fascinating conversation about a very exciting career. Thank you so much for joining us, sir. It's really a pleasure to have you on the program.
Thank you, Gana. In fact, as you were talking, I was just thinking back of the entire career. Quite exciting. Air Force is great.
Lovely, sir. So really, we love to start our guests off by getting to know them a little better. So where did you grow up? What was your motivation to join the service? What was some of that initial journey and experiences and anecdotes like?
Okay. Well, initial growing up was in Calcutta. I was going to a British school in the early 1950s. And then our parents decided that no, we are from Odisha, children must learn Odia. So we left and moved to Dhenkanal. It's a district in Odisha. So no school would take us because we didn't know Odia. And certain standards like mathematics and all were very high here. So private tuition for 2 years, and then we were 3 brothers. We joined school. None of my relatives had joined the defense services, and I just took a liking to aviation. So I would get hold of any books that had any description of aircraft. And I remember in school, then joined NCC Air Wing, and I had decided I'll join the Air Force and fly the Canberra. I knew all about the Canberra as a schoolboy.
Wow.
So that was the motivation. And then I went to college, first year degree course. And since then, I believe that there are certain things which are destiny and they have to happen. You just have to be ready to grab. I happened to come across a distant cousin. And he too was in school. He said, I'm preparing hard for NDA. Takes a couple of years preparation. I said, what's NDA? Then he told me what's NDA. I didn't know. So I went straight to the recruiting office in Chetak and I said, Bhai, idhar kuch NDA ka application lete hain. So the Havaldar said, ki ye last wala reh gaya hai, ye fill it up and bhej do jaldi se. So I filled it up, went through the test, and before I could realize what was happening, I was there in Khadakvasla. Yeah, that was, I must tell you, it's about 10 years worth of training packed into 3 years. So that's great. So after NDA, again, the dream of Canberra, my course mate used to tell me, so you're going to fly Canberra. I say, yeah. And went to Bidar, and I must say, right from the word go, right from the gliding days in NDA, I was very lucky to have very good instructors. And when I look back, it's the instructors who make you whatever you are. So went on to Bidar, flying the ST2. And that's an aircraft, when you fly first, you think, I will never do solo in this aircraft. I'll be thrown out. But then, thanks to the instructor's patience, and passed out of there, I was in the top 4. And I must tell you, I always thought I was average. It was quite a surprise. I was called up for the trophy check, though I didn't get it. I was in the top 4. Then went on to Harvard's, and same. But at the end of Air Force Flying College in Jodhpur, came a very big disappointment initially. There was a trifurcation board, and they worked on some formula. The first guy will go to fighters, second to transport, third to fighters, and fourth to helicopters. And I happened to be fourth.
Okay.
So I was told, there you go, you'll have to join HTS. So frankly, I cried in my room, and just not prepared. I thought helicopter means you are second rate in the Air Force. And that kind of a feeling came. Anyway, my destiny. So I joined HTS, and then I realized that flying the helicopter is very, very challenging. You are like the Bell 47 I flew. You move one control, then you have to adjust in all other planes, and including the throttle. It's an unstable platform. Whatever you do, it is trying to topple. So you have to get over that, and then only you can do what you want to do, like circuits landings. But again, I was a bit surprised at the end. I got the Chief of Air Staff trophy and the flying trophy in my passing out. And thereafter posted to 107 HU, Bareilly. And in June 71, we moved to Jodhpur. And it was then an open secret that we were preparing for war. And we carried out a lot of navigation exercises, night and under the hood, low level, dark night flying, that too with an instrument hood, and just map reading and flying the course and distance, accurate flying.
Wow.
So the aim was that Army will ask you to do this across the border, and we'll have to do that very accurately. So a lot of training went on.
And this was the Me-4 that you'd... so
Me-4.
HTS was only the
Bell 47.
Bell 47. And
That's
that's the
right.
little bubble, two-seat
Yes.
trainer helicopter, isn't it? Yeah.
That's right. That's right. Some call it the egg beater. So,
Right.
So Me-4, once again, for those days, it was quite a complex aircraft for us. 14-cylinder radial engine, and so many instrumentation, so many systems. You need your left hand on the throttle and right hand, 4 fingers to operate switches to start this aircraft. Everything has to be timed. Yeah, so unless you do it right, the aircraft won't start. So anyway, we learned all this. And then what happened during those night trainings, the AN-12s were also doing those similar night trainings. They had to drop people deeper into enemy territory. Unfortunately, we lost one AN-12 during those night trainings. It went into a hill somewhere near Pune.
Oh.
So this exercise was then stopped. And when the ops started, we were all one aircraft each, distributed to various army formations.
Fascinating.
So we were operating in the south, in the Rann of Kutch, and all along the border, right up to the northern tip of Rajasthan border, Ganganagar side. And sure enough, we had a wonderful atmosphere in the Air Force Station Jodhpur. When we moved in, there was no proper accommodation for 107 HU. We were shown a very dilapidated asbestos roof building where we had to really clean up and wash ourselves, everything, and the floor, the walls, and settle down. And very encouraging, pilots of 10 Squadron dropped in with breakfast.
That's it.
They said, hey, you guys. Yeah, so that was a great spirit we saw there.
How many helicopters were there?
We had 10 helicopters, and out of which normally there were 3 to 4 used to be available. But during the ops, we had, like, we used to fly a lot of aircraft with a lot of unserviceable items. One memorable one was we had to fly along the Gujarat coast looking for debris of some kind of a ship which had sunk. And I was given a helicopter which had a heavy oil leak. So a 200-liter barrel was put in the aircraft and a jerry can was given. And I was told, whenever you see the oil temperature rising, means the oil level has gone down, land on the coast wherever you can, tilt that big drum, pour out oil into the jerry can, climb on the hot engine, pour it, and then start up again. So we did all that. And then we had to
My
continue.
goodness.
There was no question of stopping. So
Amazing.
it was really great. We had a great leader, and then squad leader L.K. Datta, who was our CEO. He trusted us, and these are the kinds of briefing he said, there's no way of not flying. We have to do it. So that was a great experience taking part
Which
in
army
such an act.
unit were you attached to or working with?
You see, we had a brigade in the Ran of Kutch, and then we had 11 division working out of Ahmedabad, but we were involved with them in so many helipads along the borderline, Munnabawa being one of them. And after occupation, we moved into Khokrapar and Gadra Road and whatnot. Lots of places, and the army always tried to make us comfortable wherever, whether it was next to a sand dune or wherever. And when you think back now, we did not miss a single meal. The supply chain was so robust. We are always. So that was a great experience. And then we had a very interesting incident in and a lot to be learned. One of our helicopters, which was flying near Parcheji Veri is about 60 kilometers across the border. And army had moved in there. So our helicopter had gone to supply them ammunition. They were attacked by 2 sabers. The sabers were returning after an attack in India. And so the helicopters saw, initially they thought they were Ajit's gnats. But when the sabers turned, you could see their sawtooth leading edge. So the helicopter tried to take evasive action, turning left, right, going around sand dunes and whatnot. They kept firing and kept missing. And then 2 MiG-19s joined in. So MiG-19s also started firing. So at any time, one time there were 4 aircraft from 4 directions diving at this helicopter. So flying officer P.N. Sharma was flying. What he did is, behind a sand dune, he just landed that aircraft without reducing speed much. At about 60 kilometers, it touched down and put the fuel cock off and jumped out. They all jumped out, and the one MiG-19 came and dropped a bomb very close to the helicopter. So with the blast, there was a lot of sand which was blown up, and the windows on one side were all smashed. And after a little while, there was all silence. So the pilots came back to the helicopter and found that despite the fuel cock being off, it was still ticking over. So they started up and they came back. And I remember a phone call came that please send us 2 front tires. The Me-4 had 2 front tires. Yeah, why? What happened? Low flying. Can't help it. Low flying. So the tires were touching the sand and got deflated. So this is the type of flying one had to do. The moment you rise up a little more, you are exposed to enemy fire. So that was great. And I saw that time everybody realized that, well, I used to think helicopters maybe are not the top-notch thing in the Air Force. But I think helicopters are as important as any other stream in the Air Force.
Right. Yeah, particularly I think in the 71 war, they really provided significant punch to the army with their mobility. And
Yeah, I mean, taking 60 kilometers inside, a total of about 6,000 square kilometers. They wouldn't have managed so much. They would have managed some, but not so much without the 107 helicopters support.
so what sorts of missions were you flying? So were they Observation, was it also supply, CASEVAC, all of the above?
All of the above. And the main thing was right on the battle line when the troops needed water and ammunition. That is what we supplied on time.
And you were probably coming in, landing while they were under fire, while you were under fire, that sort of thing?
Yes, active battlefield. And one day I remember, everything looks like a movie. The battleground, you see artillery guns, you see troops and all that. It's like a movie. But one day a shell burst in front on the ground and I flew through the smoke. The smell of fresh cordite kind of jerks you that, oh, this is not a movie. This is real. So very, very interesting phase.
And landing in the desert was, that whatever whiteout or that dust cloud, those sorts of things you all had
Yes,
to deal with, I
we
presume, right?
yes we had to deal with it, and the army, whenever they wanted a semi-permanent helipad, very quickly they will put duck boards and make a small helipad. And navigation was a big challenge, so we had to identify, some temporary telephone lines, follow those, or somewhere in some remote village there's a little temple or something like that. That is how we had to do navigation. Following a course and a track and airspeed, it doesn't work because as you keep crossing sand dunes and going, the winds change. They can take you anywhere.
Yeah.
So it had to be very, very close map reading.
And you were operating, all pilots were operating in all areas of the area of responsibility. So you were going south, you were going westwards,
Yes,
you were also going north.
that's right. It depended on whenever an aircraft had to come back to Jodhpur for servicing. And then again, pilots will change, and somebody was here, somebody was there. And flying over the Rann of Kutch, especially after the ops, after 17 December, we had to maintain some posts to the north of the Rann of Kutch. So there I flew a lot over the Rann, and it's a terrain you have to see to believe what's it. The salt flats. One day we did have an emergency. We luckily had crossed the Rann into a green patch north. So we landed there. There was a hydraulic leak. So we had to come back in a BSF Jeep. And if you don't have a trained driver, you can just go into quicksand.
Oh,
And when we drove through, when the color of sand changes a bit, and that's when the driver speeds up. So if you slow down, you'll go in.
oh,
And
oh.
of course, seeing from close quarters, there are thousands of iguanas, which you don't see from the air, but they're there all around. So, well, Air Force has shown us places which I don't think anybody else would have seen.
Fascinating. And you were just barely commissioned in a few years of service, isn't it? So you had
That's right,
probably very little
71,
experience in your logbook. Yeah.
2 years service. Most of us were pilot officers and flying officers in the unit. There was one flight lieutenant who was flight commander and squad leader who was CO. So that's how we were. So after the ops, we had the first AEB visit. When everything got over, there was peace, so we concentrated in some training. And I did not have hours, 200 hours required to get a C white. C white can carry passengers. D white can carry only cargo. So I had a little over 100 hours, but when AEB came, they gave me D rec C white. That means as and when I complete my hours, I'll become C white. But I never could complete my hours. I got posted to Me 8s.
Okay.
Before visualizing. Just need 70, Roger, report time southeast, Greenwich, for midway, and you selected.
So Me-8 was just coming into the service at that time.
That's right. They were the first batch of Me 8s, and about 9 pilots who had got trained in Russia. They had formed, and I joined them as well. Then we trained in India. And if I can give you a little anecdote, very interesting. On 3rd December, when the war started, Group Captain Kaushik, who was then squadron leader Kaushik, he had come back from Russia, and he was told, okay, 118 HU will be formed. We don't know where. You go to Chabua. So he went to Chabua and he sent out a K broadcast. 118 HU functions in Chabua from today.
Sorry, sir. For the audience who don't know what a K broadcast is, can you just
Okay,
describe?
it's to all units in the Air Force. It's a wireless message. So we feel that the Pakistani intelligence picked it up. So they thought the B8s are active. So when this helicopter of ours they tried to bomb in Rajasthan sector, I've heard myself in the Pakistan radio, they claimed that they had shot down Mi-8.
Ah, okay.
So there was a lot of but there were no Mi-8s in India then. They started coming in April, May 72.
So tell us about the Mi-8. So what was that helicopter to fly like? It was a twin turbine, quite a much heavier aircraft. And I was recently learned that the pilot doesn't handle the throttle, the flight engineer does, which sounds really amazing to me.
No, in the Mi-8, the pilot did have a twist grip, but startup and switch off is by the flight
By
engineer.
the flight engineer, okay.
Yes, startup flight engineer sits in the middle, a little behind, and large cockpit compared to the Mi-4, and truly what is called CRM, the crew resource management. You had to do that. Like coordination is one thing. Like when the checks are being called out, whoever has to do what has to respond exactly at the right time. Otherwise, you will miss out some checks. And you have to manage your resources. Like the co-pilot can operate certain things which the pilot doesn't have access to.
Oh.
Things so a lot of CRM. What is CRM? We learned here. That's why I feel in a single pilot cockpit, you don't have this much of an issue as in a multi-crew cockpit where so many systems are there and everybody has to be united, cooperating, and in sync so that the task of the crew is carried forward and the aircraft then flies safely.
No, so, I've often wondered about this. As a large air force, there's so many different people, and you could be flying with anybody on a given day. And so, there's a need for you to operate in a very predictable way using standardized call outs and things like that, and for the other person to also operate in that predictable way. To what extent is this achieved and how is it achieved?
See, this is where you have an asset which you don't probably realize it's here. That is an excellent training system. It is because of this training system and everything is standardized so well. And again, AEB visiting the entire Air Force, north to south, east to west, all the time. Thus, the procedures are all very well standardized. And having flown in civil, I can tell you, when we find that there is a better way of doing something, in the Air Force, you can amend that very quickly without delay. In civil, it takes time. So, learning, upgrading your skills, this is what makes sure that no matter who you fly with, you know how to follow the procedure, you know your responsibilities. And of course, there are things to learn here. Like I was a master green as a flying officer, and I flew VVIPs, and my co-pilots. I was the junior most in the squad, so my co-pilot was always senior to me, senior in ranks, in service, in experience. So you have to be mature enough to and display your professionalism in managing your cockpit procedures. So this kind of a thing comes with training, with professionalism, which I would thank the Air Force training system, both starting from basic to the operational training in the units. It's a very high standard.
So, sir, can I ask you about that? They talk about the authority gradient in the cockpit, and in a hierarchical organization like the armed forces, that because of rank differential, that authority gradient can get worse, but at the same time, in this situation, you were the more experienced, more qualified pilot. So um, do tell me how it works in this sort of an environment.
Uh, yeah, as I just mentioned, there has to be professionalism, which is paramount. It's like signing off a cadet to go solo. You are confident of his capability and you sign off, and then he goes solo, whether it is the ST2 or the Kiran or the Bell 47 or even now the Chetak. The Chetak, they don't go exactly solo, but they go with a co-pilot. But the man who's been signed off to go solo, you have to have full confidence in him, and you have to do your work as a co-pilot, without which his job as a captain will suffer. So I think what everybody remembers, and it's a good thing, is that professionalism. I have flown, as I said, very, very often. I've flown VVIP trips where my commanding officer is my co-pilot. He would not say, no, let's do it this way. No. If weather is bad, I'll do it this way and we'll change the plan like that. And in my days flying VVIPs, we did not have a senior liaison officer on board. That came in later. So if there was a change in flight plan due to weather, I would have to directly communicate that to the Prime Minister or the President. So the good training, professionalism, and maturity, and all that comes in. In fact, VVIP flying, it is not just somebody who gets A master green is fit to fly VVIP. No, that's his flying skill. But maturity, handling protocol, all these things come in before somebody is actually detailed to fly VVIPs.
Super. So tell me about the Mi-8. So what was it like to fly? Some interesting experiences and anecdotes flying that. And where were you based when you were flying the Mi-8 in Jorat?
Mi-8, I was based in Guwahati. That is where 118 HU actually formed. And 72 end, I got posted there. And the most exciting thing after that is we were called upon to take part in the Republic Day flypast 1973. And after the war in 72, there was no flypast. So 73 flypast was with a vengeance by the Air Force, 132 aircraft.
Oh my goodness.
132 aircraft. And the first time it was decided that each formation will have its own initial point and come for the run-in. Not that they all queue up one after the other several miles away and then come in. No, each one had his own orbiting point and then come to the initial point, and each one had about 2.5 minutes direct run to the saluting dais. So I was with my CO in the very first Mi-8, and I must tell you that thought that, oh, helicopter chaps don't do it well. In the rehearsals, we were plus minus several seconds, and in the debrief, we used to be told, what is this, you chaps can't do? And we tried to explain, and then they said, no, we'll put a comscore navigator in the cockpit. He will guide you what speed to maintain and how to. So the comscore navigator came in, and after one sortie, his debrief is that winds are changing every couple of 100 yards
Right.
because of the terrain. So I cannot help. I mean, these pilots are the best ones to do. No point in having a navigator on board. So we tried to explain that everybody has a 2.5 minute run. So in 2.5 minutes, if there is a 200-meter error due to wind, a fighter aircraft will take half a second to cover that 200 meter. So you don't think he's made a mistake, because there he is on time, almost on time. But a helicopter will take 5 seconds to cover that 200 meters. So you can easily say, hey, you are late. The error is all the same for all, but it's just that the aircraft is slow. So this, correct. Yeah. So this was understood later. And so we had a very wonderful fly past. So thereafter, it was mostly going on detachment to Mohanbari. And from there, we used to carry out air maintenance sorties, load up fully, and carry on to the foothills, north Dapurijor, to the east is Teju, and then enter the hills. Once you're in the hills, nobody in the world is in touch with you. And there you are, and then do your landing and then come back. So one thing I just recollected is during those flights I used to see we are flying over a road half the distance, like going to the east to Walong or Heliong. You're flying over a road, along a road to Tezu, and from Tezu you enter the hills and thereafter. So why can't the helicopter go to Teju, load up there? Let the authorities position the load there and send a Bowser there. So I wrote a paper, about a 2-page paper, that we should do this. And that paper, I don't know how far it went. Nothing happened. But later when I was in AEB, I brought out that old paper and showed it to my CEO. So under a cover letter, it was sent as a paper from AEB. So that worked. And now we have forward maintenance bases in Zero, in Tezu, in Chakabama. So all the helicopter flights are not over the roads anymore. Wherever the load can go by road, it's taken there, and thereafter the helicopters take over. Cost cutting,
Right.
more efficiency.
Yeah, more efficiency. Let's talk about navigation in the Northeast to some of these, units that are in far-flung places. You probably
Yes.
had a very rudimentary navigation system, didn't have any fancy GPS or anything of that sort. And,
Correct.
how would one just ensure safety, that you find the right valley and don't turn down the wrong valley and get trapped with clouds and things like that?
Yeah, we just didn't go there the moment we arrived. We had to go through a proper training and familiarization. We literally by heart we had to know there's a village called EU. I remember it had only one hut, but it was marked on the map, and that's where you go to turn left or turn right. Each valley we had to know it at the back of our hands. And we of course heard of long ago when even the maps were not accurate. There was a Dakota which went to it had to go to Manigong, a place called Manigong, but it took a wrong route and never came back. Now these kind of things happen. So we had to be broken into this by proper training, familiarization, and then one is cleared. Okay, you are today cleared to go to so and so place. So that's how it's a blue book entry is made. So that's how experience is so valuable, and we get it. Then only we can operate. There is no NAVAID, as you said, and once you enter the hills, you give a call point alpha. So ATC knows you have entered the hill. Thereafter, estimated point Bravo when you come out. Of course, if you don't come out 30 minutes later than the estimated time, then the search party will go. So that is how communication was, and I hope now we do have HFRT and all, but we operated under those conditions. The aircraft loaded to the limits, and Mi-8 was notorious for its engine response. If you move the collective too fast, the RPM will drop. So you have to be very, very careful, very cool. But wonderful exposure. I must say this aircraft, we still continue with the latest version of the Mi-8, the Mi-17. And Mi-8s, I have seen them operating in Iraq. They operate in many other countries. But it's only in India that the manufacturer used to come and discuss with us and try and get ideas. So we gave a lot of ideas on the Mi-8 that this gauge should have been there, that switch should have been here and all. And when the Mi-17 came, we found all that had been done.
Fascinating.
So Mi-17 is a much improved version. So it's a very good aircraft, very, very good aircraft, and it's proven itself.
Right.
Just need 70, like your import type southeast, connection, for some ways, and selected.
So then did you go to FIS after that and get your instructor rating?
Well, you see, 74 September, Sagar Sabrat struck oil in Bombay High. And I was all wanting to go to FIS in December, but September sudden call came, 2 aircraft and 4 pilots, move immediately to Bombay.
Fascinating.
So posted to Bombay, we operated the Mi-8 into a heli deck, which was designed for a much smaller helicopter. And when you land there, the briefing is, as per the diagram, the rotor tip would miss the pillar, the posts, by 1 meter.
Oh my God.
So you're coming in to land at a place, your rotor tip misses the side of the ship just 1 meter. And I have a photograph to show that how close, but we had to operate. There was no choice. And the Mi-8 is not like a smaller helicopter which reacts very quickly to your control inputs. It's sluggish. So luckily, I did have that experience. And then I thought maybe since I'm posted here in September, no chance of FIS when I'm due for FIS. But fortunately, in December, my call-up posting came to FIS, and that was a great experience. Nice to be back in fixed wing again.
Will you fly the HT2 there, or was it the Kiran, the Deepak?
Yes, the ST2 and the Kiran. Yeah,
Okay.
and quite an experience again, because when we all landed up there, the A2 instructors there were excellent. And I was initially, KB Menon was my instructor. But when I landed up there, helicopter chaps had to do a pre-course. And the pre-course I had to do with the then squadron Prem Singh. So he looked at me, he said, "You're a flying officer and a master grade. Why? It's easy in helicopters, is it?" So I didn't react. I kept quiet. So he said, "Chalo, everybody gets 2 sorties to go solo. You being from helicopters, you'll get 3. If you don't do it, go home." So with that, I did my first sortie with him. And after about 45 minutes, I said, "Sir, I'm feeling a little sick." So he lost his temper, shouted, "You chaps, helicopter, you come and waste our time, blah, blah, blah." Came back. Next day, we took off. And this time, even earlier, in half an hour, I felt a little sick. I said, "Sir, I'm sorry, I'm feeling a little bit like vomitish."
Right. What are they doing during the sorties? Aerobatics and things like that, is it?
Aerobatics, yes. So he took over control, came straight and landed without doing a circuit. Straight landed. So I thought, I'm getting suspended. He taxied back, got out, and when I came out of the cockpit and walked back with my parachute, he was waiting there with the authorization book. He said, "Sign up and go solo." I said, "Sir," he said, "Yes, you can do it. Go solo." So I went and did my ST2 solo. And then he was very nice to me. He said, "I enjoy flying with you." And thereafter, I flew with KB Menon. Then he was, I think, a flight lieutenant. And one fine day, on the squadron, Prem Singh saw me. He said, "Hey, whenever you're free, I want to fly a sortie in the Kiran with you, show you something which I don't do it with others." So I found a sortie. He took me up and he showed me an inverted spin.
Oh boy.
And then he told me, "Come on, you do one now." He said, "Not many people do this. I don't show this to many people." So that was I think it was quite a privilege and appreciation of my flying. So then, as I always think, I thought I was average. But at the end, I got the flying trophy. The first time a pure helicopter guy got the flying trophy in FIS. And I was to hear later that the commanding officer there did all the final tests. The ST2 in the Kiran and all the marks were put together. And in the final briefing, when he heard, he said, "Are you all sure we want to give a trophy to a helicopter guy?" And that's when most of the fighter instructors said, "Yes, we have all flown with him and he's the best."
Fantastic. But the other trophies also went to a helicopter pilot, is what I remember. Yeah.
That's right. The Majithia trophy and yeah, all the 3 trophies.
Clean sweep.
Flight Lieutenant Jatinder Singh then got the ground, and at the end, the final assessment that was to influence my future career. The final assessment, then Squad Leader Ranganathan was the CFI. He wrote down there that Singh Deo is A1 material.
Wow.
And that when I saw, I said, okay, now there's nothing else. I'll do all that's possible to attain this. So that was good. And I was then posted to Bidar ST2s. When I think back now, that 3 courses I instructed in Bidar were the finest hours of my career.
Lovely.
It gives just such job satisfaction. And your students, when they do well and they take away the trophies, then you think, yes, you've done your job well. So that was a wonderful experience. So then, end of my tenure there, I was preparing for my A2. I was about to complete 300 hours, that's the requirement. And suddenly a call comes from AST, they have to go for an interview. I told my commandant, sir, I don't want to. They said, no, it's signal has come, you have to go. So I went to AST for the interview, and there I was told, look, we have to go through a selection. There were several of us, and we went through the selection. And in the interview, the then CTP, Marshal Jayal, he said, look, you don't want to come. You are saying you want to do your A2. I said, yes, sir. The AEB is already in Bidar, and I'm here. I want to do my A2. He said, okay, we'll release you today. You can go back. And if you do your A2, then we will have you back here for the PTP course. And tell me, if we send you for the ETP course, will you say, I want to do A1 and not go for the ETP? I said, yes, sir. That's a fact. So he laughed. And so I went back to Bidar, and in 1 week did some preparation, and I did my A2. So after that, you see, there are certain things you look forward to. Like I have been the junior most wherever I went. So as an instructor also, I was the junior most in my flight. So I thought once I get A2, they will probably put me somewhere as a flight commander somewhere. But then posting came to AST. Once again, the junior most there. I did the PTP course, and I must say,
how long was the course at that time?
80% PTP course then was 7 months. And yeah, the PTP course started off as a short course, and then gradually it was syllabus was increased. The aim was to make it ETP.
Right.
So from 5th course onwards, the syllabus was absolutely what the ETP course is now. We did all the theoretical subjects, we did experimental exercises. So I completed my course.
And so, sorry, can I just ask you to clarify the differences between PTP and ETP for the audience who may not know it?
Okay. Production test pilot courses that you focus more on reliability and maintainability. You check more on how to check the serviceability of a system, how to check the performance of an aircraft so that it matches what's given in the flight manual. These are all post-production exercises. And then you learn to have statistical analysis, in a fleet, how many aircraft are having some kind of defect, what is the percentage. It's a different expertise altogether. Unfortunately, I didn't do much of this because my syllabus by then had completely changed. Experimental is your aim is not to follow a flight manual, but to write the flight manual. The graphs, charts of the flight manual, you draw. You want to say hover. What is the power required to hover? You will have to put a chain under the helicopter hanging down so that you hover at the exact height, and you stabilize there. Check the readings, then you do the data reduction for different temperatures, pressures, and then you draw a chart. So it's writing a flight manual rather than following it. Experimental is that.
Got it.
So Then I was posted in AST as a staff test pilot as well as an instructor in the TPS.
And were you the only rotary wing pilot at that time?
No, there was then Group Captain Chokar was there.
Joker was there. Okay.
And yes, he has been an authority in flight testing in helicopters. And then during my tenure as a staff, the ALH project, which at that time was really an advanced light helicopter. It was a 3.5 ton design, Fenestron tail rotor, single engine. And 1977, I remember, we had finalized the cockpit layout and things like that on the mock-up. And HAL was waiting for the go-ahead to make the first prototype.
Fascinating. Wow.
Yeah, that's where the Indian government changed, and the US air attaché came to air headquarters and gave research papers on single engine versus twin engine, all the Vietnam losses. So when that document went to the chief, he wrote on it, rush to AST. And those days, rush to AST meant that we sent our Canberra to Delhi and to pick up the document and bring it. So we studied it. Lots of interesting things. But the most pertinent was that in Vietnam, any single engine helicopter which climbed more than 50 feet above the ground did not last more than 17 seconds. They were shot down by ground fire.
Wow.
So when this statistics we came to know, air headquarters of course decided then scrap the single engine design. We'll do a twin engine one. So Groupie Choker and me, we gave an idea. We said one of the famous helicopters, the Dauphine, started off as a single engine. The twin engine derivative came later. So now that we have done so much work already, almost 10 years work on the design of the ALH, let's go ahead with the single engine. Then we'll do a twin, but funding problem and all that was there. So the design was scrapped and we started from scratch again. And the present twin engine came. So by then, suddenly a vacancy came up in the Empire Test Pilot School. And of course, I was asked. I said, sorry, I had said in the beginning, I will not be opting for that. I want to go back to instructional flying. So then Group Captain Ramachandran was there. He said, look, this is something good, but if you feel very, very seriously, then okay, we'll let you go.
Right.
So who to send? So we had 3 students in the next PTP course. So they were put through tests and I was their instructor. So Wing Commander Upadhyaya was a brilliant pilot. So he went for the ATPS course and I got posted to AEB.
Okay, got it.
But the knowledge that I carried from AST, I must say as an instructor, I have made sure that knowledge is disseminated everywhere, and the knowledge level of pilots in the Air Force as well as in civil, it's benefited. One small example, one day the then Wing Commander Ramachandran, who later became Vice Chief, your father, very respected aviator and a test pilot, he told me, he said, Singhi, I want to fly with Chetak one day. I said, sir, okay, tomorrow. So next morning, I thought I'll do all the checks, ground checks and everything and wait for him to come. He said, no, I'll come with you right from now. We went, signed the Form 700 and walked up to the aircraft. I did the external checks. Now at the tail side, I had to go very close to the tail gearbox oil sight gauge. It is just a transparent glass through which you can see the oil level. And it was not visible, so I cupped my hands and from very close I had a look and the oil level seemed to be okay. So he said, look, why should a designer design a sight gauge like that where the pilot will have so much difficulty in checking the oil level? It's critical. And why should a test pilot clear an aircraft which has got such a cumbersome way of checking the oil level? So that struck in my mind. And I went and checked and I found the brand new Chetaks and Cheetahs had a white surface behind the oil level. so you could easily see it. In the
Interesting.
old Chetak, that color had faded, and so then I immediately worked on it, and we got the thing painted. Subsequently, and I can tell you now, in the Westland 30, the checklist said check the tail rotor, gearbox, oil level only in the first flight of the day. Whereas in Nagaland and all, we did several flights a day. And I remembered my AST experiences. Look, this color is fading. You can't see clearly. So in Pawan Hans, I suggested, and we wrote a letter to DGCA that this checklist should be changed. It should be check the oil level every flight, not just the first flight of the day. DGCA said our procedure, making a change, we have to write to the manufacturer. They have to agree and say no objection, this, that. By the time that could be done, we lost a helicopter in Nagaland, where people lost their lives. The tail rotor had no oil in it. It was not visible. And it heated up, melted, and the tail rotor came off, and the aircraft just spun around and hit the ground. So, yes, lots of knowledge gained in the AST, which I must say helped the whole Air Force and the civil helicopter world a lot.
Right.
Just need 70, like your import type southeast, connection, for some way, and you'll select it.
Did you face this translation problem, which is that you were speaking, of theory and science and engineering, which a lot of operational pilots were uncomfortable or not familiar with or didn't want to hear, and you had to kind of translate it into a language that they would understand a lot.
Yes, I found this because some of the languages I used after AST were quite like test pilot language, which one had to explain.
Right.
Yeah, so that kind of a cultural thing, and well, it had to be explained, and people were happy to understand. And being in AEB again, I went all over, flew all the types, so knowledge could be disseminated. And AEB experience, I must say, categorization is one thing. Who could be A category, who is B, who is master green, who is green. This is not difficult to assess a pilot. What is difficult is to standardize across the entire fleet.
Right.
So that is where AEB we focused, as you asked in the beginning. How is it that a pilot gets posted from one unit in the west to a unit in the east? Well, all he needs is one check ride with his CO, and then he's okay. He goes around flying. It's because of an excellent training and standardization in our Air Force.
Right. But it boggles me that has been so well institutionalized, because I've flown with many different instructors, and each one is a little bit of a cowboy. They will want to do things in a slightly different way about how you lean the engine, or whether you use trim or not in a steep turn. And there is no standardization, at least in the civil flying world that I've been exposed to. And it is fantastic that the Air Force has been able to achieve that level of standardization. And they have procedures that work in all situations and circumstances. And so that is a fantastic job. I'd love to just walk through the process of getting input from all these places, preparing that standardization document, sending it back, getting feedback. What's that process like?
Okay, right in AST, when I flew the Chetak, there was a process of restarting a helicopter in the air. And while doing that exercise, I found a defect. I put it in my test report. So that was immediately sent to air headquarters, and they accepted it. And the SOPs are there. They were amended. And while in AEB, when we do the mass debriefing, there may be 2 units and maybe visitors from other stations who have come for their categorization. There may be 50, 60 pilots sitting, and you debrief, where you bring out which are the exercises where you find some deviation and why. So you start interacting with the pilots. And I have had instances where somebody comes out with a suggestion, why can't we do it like this? Okay, if it's okay with everybody, and if it's something so simple that you don't need to really go into the books to check, on the spot you tell them, okay, SOP changed, we are following up in writing, but you don't delay anymore, you can change this SOP to this. That has been done, and that's the great thing about the Air Force.
Mm-hmm. Wow. And so then a message goes out to all units that operate that type that here's the new SOP, then they modify their checklists and procedures. Wow.
That's right. There is a SOP issued by the Air Headquarters that gets changed, like the other helicopters, for example, the Me-4. You had to do a brake check when you taxied out. So you apply the brake and stop it completely and see it's not turning left, right. In the Me-8, it's a pneumatic brake and there is a gauge which shows you how much brake pressure is being applied. So when it came to the Me-8, one of the pilots in a mass debrief, he said, why do we stop the helicopter and start again? Because why can't we just see there is this deceleration and sufficient pressure? It should be enough. I said, yes, it's fully justified. Procedure changed. You don't have to stop the helicopter anymore. Just see deceleration and continue. And then we changed it in writing later.
Right.
So this is the greatness about the Air Force. We could keep improving our processes and systems and procedures.
Fascinating. I mean, because a mammoth organization, you would expect there to be a lot of slow-moving bureaucracy and paperwork, but it sounds like for the important things, you cut to the chase very quickly and very easily, which is lovely.
Yes. And AEB experience, I had 2 tenures in AEB. In between, I went to Iraq and back again in AEB. In my first tenure, I know people often criticize and say, how can you find out the performance of a pilot in just one sortie? Well, an experienced QFI and an experienced examiner doesn't need a full sortie to find out the capabilities. You have to be in that field to understand this. There was a case I flew with one pilot, and we came back and I told the CO that this man needs more training, he's dangerous. So I gave him what is called category E. Cat E is fit only for training. He can't fly cargo also. So then I went away and didn't hear anything more about it. I thought maybe he's being trained, we'll see. And after a couple of years, some station I had gone to, I went for dinner to the dining room and I find this person sitting there. He said, sir, do you recognize me? I said, we met. Yes, you gave me Cat E. And after that, papers were moved and my branch has been changed from flying branch to logistics branch.
Mm-hmm.
So I said, I'm very sorry to hear that. He said, no, sir, my problem is I'm an alcoholic.
Oh.
And that's what got me down. And because I got Cat E, I can tell you I'm still alive. Otherwise, I would have had a crash and killed people. So now I can tell you, I thank you for giving me Cat E. So there you are. I mean, sometimes decisions like this had to be taken. But yes, you can judge a pilot in one sortie.
Is there sometimes pressure brought on you that, hey, maybe he's just having a bad day. I've flown with him a lot. I know he's much better than this. Can you give him another chance? Do CEOs and flight commanders do that to you?
Yes, that did happen. And again, there were senior examiners who would guide the new ones who come. That if you give in once, then the news spreads, oh, this guy, we can always request him.
He's an easy examiner.
Yes. But if you stick to your position, then the news goes around and then nobody asks you again to do something. So this is again an experience as an examiner, which is passed down generation to generation.
Right. And for a particular fleet, is there one examiner at any given point in time? Are there a few? So, you were, I think, an examiner on the
Depend
817 Chetak and Cheetah, all four?
on that's right, all 4. And what happens is depends on fleet size. So if there are large number of aircraft of a particular type, you would need more examiners, and you better be experienced on that type. You can't do a quick conversion after posting to AEB and become an examiner. No, that was never encouraged.
Right. Yeah.
Because the fleet will not have respect for you.
For respect, yeah.
Yeah. And I also, that's right. You have to prove also. I mean, there may be somebody with a couple of 1,000 hours and you've just converted with 5 hours and you go and test him, he will not like it. So that was not encouraged. And I was also taken along with the training command examiners like the ST2 and Kiran also. I examined at FIS, Air Force Academy, and Bidar Elementary Flying School. So I enjoyed flying, so that was a good opportunity.
Right. So tell me about Iraq, sir. Did you train them on flying helicopters, or were you a fixed wing instructor there?
Yes. Yeah, we were an instructor in their basic flying school, which they flew Chetaks, the Alouette. That was in a very remote area. And after 1 year of mine, they did have a flying instructor school in Baghdad. And I was to learn this through the FIF history portal. That Commander Mayadev was posted there because he was A1. So that was the requirement there. And they wanted to then have helicopters in that. So I was taken from K2 to Baghdad. So I started there, the helicopter part of the FIS there.
Okay, wow. What was your experience like there? What are they like as pilots, procedures, as you know, their discipline, Air Force quality?
Yeah, basically they were good flyers. And even though we did not speak Arabic, unlike our previous batches, they were given some lessons in Arabic. We were not. So we had to train by, by giving examples, sign language and all. But they used to pick up fast and very, very motivated. And I would say at times a little restless because Iraq-Iran war was on. So they were all the time sometimes angry, wanted to quickly finish the tests and go join some unit. So that kind of attitude was there. And Iraq, I mean, throughout my 2 years there, Iraq-Iran war was in full swing. And in Baghdad, I have seen a live scramble. A MiG-21 and a Mirage took off from opposite directions of the runway, planned, and turned north because a threat was coming from north, probably headed towards the presidential palace. So they intercepted, and so we were there all the time. I mean, in the midst of everything. And though RT was in Arabic, we were briefed that if you ever hear the word Shaheen, wherever you are, just land. So we used to land and wait for the all clear and then fly. But yes, they were basically good flyers and very motivated. But again, when it comes to anything new, they were not there. For example, there was a major exercise where they wanted to induct 3,000 troops into a certain area. So they could not do a good flight plan. So they asked we did have a senior officer also on deputation. So Marshal Rusty Sinha, then an Air Commodore, he was there. So he was asked. So he called me and we made a flight plan and gave it to them. So that kind of a thing, they would venture out. Like Me-8's there, any maintenance problem, they would come and ask me. So that way, they depended a lot. And we as instructors and being Indians, we were a privileged class. Everywhere respected.
Okay. So moving on, perhaps to some of the other helicopters that you've flown, the Mi-17, the Chetak and Cheetah, and any interesting experiences there?
Yes, I would like to talk about one experience. The AST, not about the helicopters. There was a Rogue Kiran aircraft. as we call it, test pilot parlance, a Rogue, it had a spin problem. So Air Force Academy referred it to AST. So it came here, and the late Squadron Ashok Yadav, Alpha, he and me were detailed to do some spin tests on that aircraft. So the aircraft was instrumented completely, and we went up, did a few sorties, and finally we had to do one exercise which we tell all students never to do. That is, in a spin, never use anti-spin aileron. So we had to test it out, just in case a student does that mistake. So we climbed to 30,000 feet. Dangerous altitude was sent to 13,000 feet. And we did the spin. Then we applied opposite aileron. And the aircraft suddenly behaved very differently, not in an expected manner. And it got stuck in the spin. Very, very vicious spin. So much so I remember my helmet hitting the side of the windshield. And the pad and pencil fell off my hands. I could only hear Ashok Yadav calling out the emergency recovery method. That stick centrally forward, jerk, 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 full opposite rudder, centrally forward, stick, jerk, jerk. After several of these attempts, we recovered, and we of course pulled out very low. Then we realized that the dangerous altitude warning light and horn had already come on. We should have ejected it. And anyway, we came back quite shaken up. When we landed, the other test pilots who were on the ground monitoring the telemetry, they all came out to meet us at the tarmac. They said, "Hey, what happened?" "Oh, well, this happened." So there were traces on the ground, of the telemetry traces. For 22 seconds we were spinning. That's quite a lot. That's quite a lot, from 30,000 feet down to I don't know how high. So really very, very hair-raising experiences. And Alpha was a very, very experienced test pilot, a very good pilot, but unfortunately we lost him.
Yeah.
And yeah, helicopter, of course, very good experiences. I must say, in AEB, I learned a lot because I flew with over 1,000 pilots. Air Force, Army, cadets, Navy, everybody.
Oh, wow.
And ARC.
I didn't realize that AEB used to do categorization for Army, Navy, ARC.
Yeah, then we used to do, not now. Now they have their own evaluation board. But ARC, I think we still do. And there was a presidential order authorizing Aircrew Examining Board examiners to fly with ARC. And their flying is very different. But we used to. Yeah, the one hair-raising experience with ARC. I had to go convert one Mi-8 pilot onto the Chetak. So I went to Dumduma, stayed a week there, did his conversion. And when I signed off his logbook, he says, as per ARC norms, I'm fully ops. So I said, no, take it easy, slowly. Then, no, I'm now fully ops. So he made a flight plan from Dumduma, which is east of Chabua, to Guwahati to drop me. And I looked at the flight plan, so many gallons fuel, this, that. No, looked okay. So we took off. And sometime around midway, I started having doubts about the fuel reserve. I said, look, recalculate, otherwise we will have to divert to Tezpur. He said, no, this okay, this, that, you know. Anyway, the low fuel warning light came on. But thank God, keeping fingers crossed, we managed to land in Guwahati. And then I said, let us check, we are wrong somewhere. It cannot be. And then we checked. This was one of the few alouettes which had the fuel gauge marked in US gallons. Okay. We always thought it was imperial gallons. There's a good 10% difference. So there was less fuel than we thought. Thank God we didn't have to learn it the hard way by force landing. But these are things we operated in the Air Force. Mind you, some of the aircraft were non-standard. So we learned it the hard way. Yeah. In fact, much later, you might have heard the name of Frank Robinson, the man who made the famous Robinson helicopters,
Right.
thousands of them
R22,
used as
R44.
trainers.
Yeah.
And R22, R44, R66. So it was a very, very great design. And Robinson was a great flyer. I met his son one day in the US, and he said, I was flying my helicopter one day and I was going to Fort Worth in Texas. It is all desert type, and far, far away, I could see the destination. And that's when my fuel warning light came on. So I made quick calculation. I said, oh, it's 15 minutes. I'll land in 10 minutes. So I'll still have 5 minutes fuel reserve. And he went and landed, no problem. He says, when I told this to my father, he said, you did a foolish thing. The fuel warning light is a red light. It says land immediately. How did you dare to fly with that red light on, even if it was 5 minutes away? No. So there's a great thing to learn here for all of us, that no, none of your flight planning should be such that you'll make it with just the fuel warning light coming on.
Just need 70, like your import type southeast, connection, for some midway, and you will still active.
So tell me about the Westland WG-30 and Pawan Hans, some of that civil flying now.
Yeah, okay. So 1986, I just was completing 16 years of service, waiting to have my first board for a promotion. And news comes that Army Aviation Corps is forming up. And the then AOP was Air Marshal Suri. From air headquarters, he sends a message that I have to meet him immediately. So I was a little worried, why should the AOP call me? I went to his office. He said, son, all helicopters will most probably go away to the Army. And there will be no carrier left for helicopter guys in the Air Force. So we don't know yet, a lot of uncertainty. But one good news is Pawan Hans is being formed. So I suggest you go. So I got a shock of my life. I was in no frame of mind to leave the Air Force. He said, look, you can go straight away on absorption, and or you can go on deputation. After 2 years you get absorbed. I said, sir, I want my rank, so I'll go on deputation. He said, no, but if you do that, you lose seniority in Pawan Hans. I said, sir, doesn't matter. If I have to leave the Air Force, nothing else matters to me. So I went on deputation. I picked up my rank while on deputation. Westland training was, well, there were only about 10 Westlands that had been made and sold by the factory. When India wanted the Westland for the Bombay High area, they made these 21 more. And during the trial, it was found out that it's not meeting the single engine safety requirement. So they put a new Rolls-Royce Gem 60 engine. This was a twin spool engine, a very modern design, and it had an electronic engine control. Not a FedEx. FedEx had not come in yet. It was an analog computer which controlled the engine. So when we went it was still something new even for the test pilots and the instructors in the Westland factory. So they told us, look, every time you do any training, you are told we must practice emergencies, but these won't actually happen. But here we have to tell you there will be emergencies. So you better do it seriously, do your training seriously. So none of us were IFR pilots, we were VFR. So we were sent for IFR training first on simulators, and then we did the conversion. And with 10 hours on type, we returned back and we had to start flying offshore. So obviously those of us who had some past experience offshore flying were very useful there. And then an examiner was invited from UK. He came and did my instrument rating test. So I became the first civil instrument rated pilot on the Westland 30 in India. Quite a task, starting instrument flying. We decided we'll do as and when the aircraft land up in Delhi, we had to take them either to Bombay or to Assam to start the bases there. And I said, fine, we'll do all the cross countries at night. So pilots will get to log some night hours and instrument hours, because once we let go the pilot in civil, once he's cleared, he is on his own. Unlike the Air Force, you land at a place where there is all bandobast. But in civil, you land, somebody may have hired a helicopter, there may be a VIP trip or whatever. When you land there, you got to find out from the police that where can I get two security guards, I'll pay them cash, they have to sleep the night here. Fuel you buy by cash, and all kinds of arrangements. You don't have access to a telephone everywhere, like in the Air Force stations, you can contact anywhere, but no. So wherever we had an Air Force base nearby, we would get help. Otherwise, it was quite a task setting up operations in all the northeastern places like Kohima, like Aizawl, Shillong, Jorhat. So it was quite a challenging task, but quite enjoyable. We started off like, you have to set up kiosks to sell tickets, passengers will buy ticket and come. And of course, there was no weather briefing in the remote areas. We had to study yeah. So what Air Force being a fighting force, what I had not seen the risks, I actually saw in the
Right.
in the Westland flying.
Whole different ball game, passengers and safety.
Yes, and we lost two Westlands. The first one was exact reason not known in Vaishno Devi, and the second one was, as I told you, the tail rotor gearbox problem.
Gearbox oil.
And yeah, and then what happened in Mumbai, Juhu, one of the flights to offshore, passengers, 9 of them sat down. The helicopter picked up to a hover, and after that, the pilot had absolutely no control. He would move the stick left, right, collective, up, down. Nothing happened to the helicopter. This aircraft was designed such that if you had a hydraulic failure, there was no manual reversion. I mean, how did such a design get passed? So today, there are aircraft with similar design, but fly-by-wire, but that is, you need triple redundancy, 3 systems. But those days, nobody thought of that. So there were 2 hydraulic systems controlled by one single valve. If that single valve was defective, your both systems packed up and there is no manual reversion. So the aircraft started doing a pendulous movement. It would move to the left, tilt up to the right, and then go the other way, tilt left. And nothing was happening. The pilot was struggling with the control. So the co-pilot at the right time said, should I shut the engine? He said, yes. So the engines were shut. The aircraft did a heavy landing, luckily didn't roll over. And the ONGC workers came out. They ran to the ONGC office next door, caught hold of the collar of some of the officials that this is a dangerous aircraft, will not fly.
My goodness.
So, yeah. So then the Westland got temporarily grounded. And with all the adverse publicity, manufacturer also said, no, you can't do this, that, and all. Then a committee was set up, Dr. Hussaini committee. Dr. Hussaini was the DRO in Ministry of Defense, Director Aeronautics. So he did an inquiry where I also got involved, and he proved it that there is a design error in this aircraft. There are so many things which are not right. So the certificate of airworthiness for the entire fleet was withdrawn.
Oh boy. What was Westland's reaction to these things?
You see, initial reaction is, no, you don't know anything, we know what it is. I'll give you one example. The Westland had a rotor brake, which was a hydraulic brake operated electrically. Now, most of the aircraft we have flown just has a mechanical brake. You raise a lever, it slows down the rotor, and then you stop it. But here there is a small switch. You put the switch on, brake on. The hydraulic system gets activated, brakes are applied, and the rotor comes to a halt with a lot of grinding noise. The unfortunate part is that this entire brake housing was made of magnesium aluminum alloy. So Dr. Hussaini committee pointed that out. That is dangerous. There can be a fire. So the manufacturers did not agree with us. They said, no, we know what we are doing. The same brake system was used in the EH-11, the 3-engined helicopter. I think we got 3 or 4 of them for our VIP
VIP
flight.
flight, right?
They are grounded, of course.
Mm.
Yeah. So this EH-11 has the same brake system and exactly the same part, same component. And during one of their experimental flights, due to an electrical short circuit, the brake came on. So very soon it caught fire. Mind you, 3 engines are driving it and one brake system trying to stop it.
Yeah.
It just caught fire. And the one pilot and one flight engineer, they had parachutes all right. The pilot managed to escape. It came down in the parachute. The flight engineer was not so fortunate. And the whole aircraft just caught fire in the air and came crashing down. So thereafter, I mean, they must have realized, so they didn't tell us anything. But yes, we did point out such things in the aircraft. And great job done by the Hussaini committee report. We grounded the aircraft. So all the Westland pilots had nothing much to do.
What happened finally? Did we fix those problems, or did they replace that with something else?
No, more of dolphins were purchased, and the entire Westland fleet, I think, was auctioned as junk.
My God. Okay. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it was a big loss. So then I left. I got appointed in Malaysia. They flew same offshore flying S-76, and with my qualification, they appointed me the technical pilot there. So I would spend time climbing up on top of the helicopters and watching out how maintenance is done and all. And they, again, unlike India, they had set up the entire operations by giving a consultancy to a British firm.
Mm-hmm.
So the British firm wrote down the entire procedures and everything, and they followed that like a Bible, no change. So when I started flying, I told the chief pilot, I said, look, takeoffs from the oil rigs look a little dangerous because the tail, people are losing height from hover. The tail just about misses the deck. They said, no, there's nothing wrong. You have to improve your flying technique. There's nothing wrong. Then I checked up the calculation of the weight and performance. They take the height as 0 because it's sea level. And then they do all the calculations. I said, no, you are not at 0. The heli deck is 150 feet high. And then you take the pressure, ambient pressure into account and the temperature. With all this, you are sitting at about 1,000 feet above ground. And with that, your payload should be this much. So you have to reduce one passenger. So they said, no way. These are done by a very, very experienced and famous firm. And we paid so much to get this procedure. So there was one Indian pilot there. He said, look, do one thing, just put it in writing. So I put it in writing and they sent it to Sikorsky. And Sikorsky, when they saw that, they sent a test pilot to come and check it out. So the test pilot sat with me, saw the calculation. He said, of course, you are overloading the aircraft. So he just left a letter that you are overloading the helicopter. If something happens, Sikorsky would not be responsible.
Wow. It's a simple density altitude adjustment, is it?
That's right. You have to take the QNH, and in the South China Sea, the QNH is always about 995 instead of 1013.2 most of the time in the year. So you have to cater for all this. And we were not surprised that there was an error here, but so they had to learn it the hard way. And of course, the reputation of Indian pilots then went up. So I spent 3 very good years there doing a lot of instrument flying in heavy rains, and there are different type of approaches you do in heavy rain onto the oil rig. It's called a rig radar approach. I learned new things, and at the end of 3 years, I came back, and it just so happened Bell Helicopter was setting up their office, and they asked me to join. I said okay. So 1997, I joined them. There was an American gentleman. So after 1 year, he left. And so later in the debrief, they asked, when I was retiring, they asked me several questions. So any weaknesses? I said, yeah, you people don't do handover takeover properly. One man is handling something and he says, okay, I'm going, and he's gone. The next man is supposed to run things his way. But there has to be a continuity. So this is one of the defects. But yes, in Bell also, I learned a lot. And then I got along very, very well with the designers and test pilots of Bell. Many trips, thanks to Bell, I think over 40 countries I visited, because each time they want to have a meeting, they'll live in a different country. Yeah. And I tried my best to have some Bell manufacturing done in India. I worked with some other private companies. Today, a Bell 407 composite fuselage is completely made in Bangalore by Dynamatic Technologies. In US, we had contracts with 60 companies to come give us the parts and components prefabricated, and then we'll assemble it. Today, all those 60 contracts are gone. There's a single contract with Dynamatics in Bangalore. They make all those components, assemble it, and sell us the whole fuselage.
Fascinating.
So yes, India can do it.
Amazing.
Yeah. That is, all along, as I said, I used to think that I'm mediocre. But surprising, in HTS, I stood first. In FIS, I got the flying trophy. AST, PTP course, I stood first. So how come? And in Bell, I think I got the answer. Bell encouraged every employee to have 5 aims in life. First one was walk the talk. Simple. Second one is set a target and meet it. You set your own target and meet it. Third one is act with velocity. Fourth one is take on risk. If you don't take risk, your boss would just not like you. Take risk even if you fail. Say, I took a risk and failed. Good job. And the fifth one is what the answer to everything is. Love your profession. I think that's what, if you love your profession,
Lovely.
You may think you are just ordinary, but you are doing this.
Yeah, I've written it down. These
That's
are
a
all
great thing
great
to learn.
5 points. Amazing. I mean, sir, you were 4th in your course, so by no means mediocre. And I think, from an Air Force's perspective, you need the best people, you need the best pilots, best people to go everywhere. And so every stream needs good people. So you have to be,
Yes.
only then you can be good in everything.
Yeah. And I think to some extent, I managed to prove it that no, helicopter people are not second rate. They are as important. It is just that the aircraft is slow. Doesn't mean that it is less risky. I mean, you fly at 10 feet, the ground is a blur. Like a fighter, you fly at 50 feet, the ground is a blur. Same way, helicopter, you fly at 10 feet with your tires touching the sand, with noise of enemy fighter aircraft above you. It's the ground is a blur. I mean,
It's, well, sir, I've taken so much of your time. I cannot thank you enough for your service, and I cannot thank you enough for the time you've taken for throwing light on helicopter operations, your experiences, for me and the audience. Really very grateful.
No, thank you. It's been a pleasure. You are doing a great job for this aviation as such, both military and civil.
It's a small way in which I'm trying to give back, sir. Thank you.
Visual show Just 870, like your import type southeast, connection for midway, and you'll select it.
Well, folks, that's all we have time for this week. Join us again next week. In the meantime, sign up for updates at blueskiespodcast.com. There you'll find links to follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. You can also write to us with your comments, questions, suggestions, and feedback from the website or to blueskies@prganapati.com. Subscribe to the podcast on any podcasting platform such as Stitcher, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and even on YouTube. If you like what you heard, share it with your friends, give us a rating in your favorite podcasting app, and write us a review. It will help other people find us. I want to give my thanks to Saurav Chordia for our logo and Prithvik for the music. I want to reiterate that all the views expressed here are personal, and this podcast has not been approved by or reviewed by the Air Force, Ministry of Defense, or any branch of the government. In the meantime, stay safe and Jai Hind.